Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. Welcome back to the podcast, friends. This interview with Kate from Work Well with Kate is sure to leave you motivated and way more productive by the end of the episode than you were at the start. So Kate is walking us through 4 ways to streamline and simplify your business. We talk a lot about time management, setting boundaries, obstacles to managing your time well, and all kinds of like calendaring and time management type things. Kate also shares some strategies for how she's able to work just 4 hours a day and have a 6-figure-a-year business. I think you'll love her thoughts on that. And we talk about that at the very end of this episode. So be sure to stay tuned until then. And you might think this episode sounds familiar if you're a longtime podcast listener. So this episode originally aired in October 2020. And I'm re-airing it because it's been a top episode of the podcast ever since, like seriously in the top 5. And so whether you missed this when it originally aired, or maybe you did listen to it already and you're like, I don't really know that I implemented all those steps, the 4 steps Kate talks through, then it's time for a refresher. It's time to listen up because there's so much you can gain from this conversation. It's certainly worth a re-listen. And at the time that you are hearing this re-airing, if you are listening to this live, then I am either slightly past my due date on baby watch, or I have a baby now, which is so crazy to be saying that as I'm recording this intro well over a month before you guys are going to hear it, but so crazy. I'm so excited. So be sure to connect with me on Instagram. I'm just at Elizabeth McCravey. But if you want to stay up to date on all things baby, maybe go see, have I had the baby yet? Am I still waiting? Who knows? I'm really excited for motherhood and birth and all the things. So anyway, it's kind of fun thinking ahead to that. And fun fact, Kate actually just recently had her first baby too, also a boy, earlier this summer. So it's kind of fun because when we originally did this interview, we were not pregnant. Neither of us were moms yet. And now as we're re-airing this, we both will be or both about to be, which is really fun. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope you gain so much from it. And I want to encourage you as you're listening to really try to like not just listen and be encouraged and inspired, but listen and implement. Like maybe get out your notes app and like decide, I'm going to take a few notes on this. These are the specific things I'm going to implement from what Kate is teaching, because that's how you're going to get these results in your business. And seriously, I believe that what she's teaching in this episode is going to help you get so many results. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Kate. You are in for a treat today because I'm sitting virtually with Kate Rosenow from Work Well with Kate. And I have a feeling you guys are just going to love her teaching style and all of your smarts. And so Kate, I have to tell you, I know we've become like internet friends, but it's so fun because I think I've said this before to you, but I found you from an Instagram ad. And usually when I see those, if I do anything, it's a swipe up, but instead I clicked over to your Instagram profile and I was like, oh, I love everything she's sharing. I have got to follow her. And then you ended up following me back and we ended up chatting. So anyway, I love your content and I learn a lot from what you share. And so I'm excited for everyone to learn from you as well. So welcome.
Thank you. I feel the exact same way about you. I feel like when I started following you, I hit the jackpot, all of your tips, like every Wednesday, I'm like on your feed, like making sure I'm getting all your tips. So I feel the exact same way and I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yay. Yeah, this is going to be awesome. So, okay, for people who have not met you yet, will you share kind of who you help and what you do and just all about like what you're doing in your business?
Absolutely. So in Work Well with Kate, essentially what I do is I help service-based business owners streamline, simplify, and systematize all of their processes so that they can be more profitable and less busy. So I work with coaches, consultants, designers, really anyone that offers a service that's a service provider, and just help them make the managing of their business more manageable so that they can do the thing that they actually started their business to do.
Yes. Okay. I love it. And seriously, the tips you share though around the streamlining, some of it can seem like simple, but makes such a huge difference. And some of it does not seem simple, but I love all of it. So, okay. I think your story of starting your business is really interesting. So let's talk about that for a minute too, about you had another business before this one. So you want to talk about how you built that up and then the transition and everything?
Absolutely. So I joke that I was kind of an accidental entrepreneur. When I graduated college and got my first job, I kind of became obsessed with career advice and learning about how people get the careers that they want. And so in 2014, I kind of accidentally started this blog that turned into a business called Mavenly. And so because I started with just the passion for the work and was really excited about that, obviously, I didn't know anything about running a business. I had no clue like what LLCs were, how do you get a bank account, like all of that was so confusing to me. And obviously through trial and error, I kind of figured it out, but there were some foundational elements that clearly weren't there. So fast forward probably 2 years into our business journey, on the outside, our business looked really successful. So we had lots of listeners of our podcast, lots of followers. We were featured in Forbes. We were selling out events, but on the inside of our business, it was the exact opposite. I joke that it was like the hot mess express. Like we had nothing together. I was working like 12-hour days. I was neglecting my other relationships. I was constantly working, just like tied to my desk, tied to my laptop, and realized eventually once I got admitted to the hospital for like stress and overwhelm that like, this is not sustainable. It's not something I can do long term. And that was such a hard thing to grapple with when I built this thing that I clearly really loved, but it just wasn't working for the lifestyle that I wanted. And so it really became kind of a non-negotiable to change the way that I was running my business. I could no longer be doing all of the things that I was doing. I could no longer be running in a way that wasn't streamlined and wasn't simplified, was just kind of operating at the whim of whatever came into my inbox. And so after that point of being in the hospital and then coming back into my business, I decided to start automating, streamlining, and simplifying, and really learning a lot of that from other business owners that I admired. And once I started learning it, I mean, it completely transformed the way that I ran my business and actually doubled my business once I started implementing all of those systems. And so I realized that even though I had this passion for like career-focused work, I became even more passionate about systems and strategies because I knew all of these women that were starting businesses that were maybe, web designers, graphic designers, coaches, consultants that knew the subject matter of what they wanted to do. Like they were experts in their field, but they had no idea how to run a business. And that was keeping them from really growing the type of business that I knew that they could. And so I started just helping friends kind of for free run their business more effectively or sharing tools and tips. And eventually it got to a point where more people were asking about how to run their business than they were career coaching and like career advice. And so that was kind of like a, light bulb moment for me of like, oh, this is really interesting. So I ended up exiting my first business and starting Workwell with Kate and helping women do that. And I truly feel like it sounds so crazy, but it's like, this is what I was meant to be doing because I'm able to help so many people do the thing that they're meant to be doing, which is ultimately providing a service in a way that still supports their lifestyle and allows them to live their life.
Yes. Okay. I love that story. And I'm curious with closing or I guess exiting the business, what was that like for you? Like, how'd you know that you should do that versus just like kind of staying? I know you said that you felt like you were talking more about systems, but what was that like exiting? Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravy.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravy.com/CHM. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, I think like for anyone, you have this moment where you realize that maybe you just no longer like wake up and feel excited to do the work that you were doing. And in that previous business, I had a co-founder that eventually came on board with me probably like 4 months into my process of setting up Mavenly. And so ultimately I felt like it wasn't fair to her for me to feel like I need to step back for like health reasons, for a lot of reasons. I stepped back kind of that initial come to Jesus moment of like, I can't do this, but then also realizing like now I have this passion for this other thing and I want to work a little bit less. I want to be a little bit more strategic with my time. And I felt like it wasn't necessarily fair to be like, hey, I'm going to be focusing on this new endeavor. I want to be spending more time there and less time here. And so it just became sort of obvious to me that I wanted to go all in on Work Well with Kate and systems. And there was no real room in my mind or even in my schedule based on how I wanted my schedule to run to continue to like support that business. So we had explored a couple of different options. And I think a lot of people do this when they're thinking about, what are the opportunities I have with my business? And ultimately, if you're running your business on your own, those options can look very different than when you have a co-founder. And so for me, that was really a chance for me to say like, what do I think is best for my co-founder? What do I think is best for me? And how do we find a path forward that works for both of us? And the path forward for me was like, just kind of totally moving on to this new chapter of my life, which ended up being a really great decision. But I think for everyone that looks a little bit different. I know some founders that they still have their old business and they're running their new business and that feels good. For me, and we'll probably talk more about this in this interview, I'm a very like one-track mind, like focused on a certain mission, like wake up every day with like one mission in mind type of person. And so I knew I'd be doing a disservice to my previous business if I was trying to juggle both.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can relate to the one-track mind thing as well. So that business is still existing then, or is it not anymore?
So it still has pieces of that business and that platform available to people. Like we had a podcast, the podcast is still available, the blog is still available. We did features that's still available, but as a functioning like revenue generator, it hasn't continued in the same way that we had it with the coaching and those pieces.
So I think that's so cool too for people listening that like you can transition heavily. Like, cause sometimes people think like what you choose is like, okay, I want to start a business. This is what I'm going to do, that you have to stay with it until you're like 60 years old. And it's like, you're young and I've already done a like career transition in what you're doing in your business.
I mean, and just like you're a great example of this as well, as like going from, designing with one-on-one to like templates, now like eventually teaching designers. Like, I think all of us have an evolution of like, once you learn something, you get excited about that new thing and you start to like evolve in that way. And very naturally, I think your business grows with that. And really every business owner that I truly admire, even if they're not exiting a business and starting a new one, I've seen like 7 iterations of that same business, which I think is so cool. Cause I think you're right. We have this perception of like, I start a business and I'm like on the ship until the end. And it's like, you have freedom to do whatever works best for you and feels good to you. And it makes sense that we're going to transition because I mean, the last time I had a career in the traditional sense was like 8 years ago. So like when people are asking me for resume advice, like when I was exiting my business, I was like, this is no longer something that I'm thinking about every day. I'm thinking about the best project management system. And so it totally makes sense to me that people would want to and totally can transition.
Yeah. I love that advice to like think about with stuff. Yeah. So, okay. people who listen to this podcast regularly know this. I ask people to send me notes before interviews. So I always say this, but like, I've already seen your notes. And so Kate's going to be walking us through, it's technically 5 things, but we're starting with a 0, like a literal number 0, but she's going to be sharing 4 steps to streamline and simplify your business. And these are just like genius things. And so listen up closely, but we're even going in like order of like the way to do this. So let's start with the number 0 thing for people who want to simplify and streamline.
Absolutely. So this is the exact thing I do with my clients, with all of my students. Like, this is the very necessary process before we do any other work. And so, yeah, you're right. It's technically 5 steps, but the first step, I'm like, that's not actually something they have to do. It's just kind of getting everything on paper. So I joke with my clients that the first thing we do is a business owner purse dump. So I like the analogy of like, when you first get a purse, you just have like your wallet and your cell phone, got the essentials, you can find everything, you're good. About 3 months later, there's like glitter, concert tickets, like your boyfriend's cologne, like there's a million things in your purse and you're like, I can't even find the thing that I'm supposed to be carrying around in here. Like, I can't even find my wallet because I have a million other things in my purse. The same thing happens with our business. We watch a webinar, we get a new software, we like find, a new banking system that we like, and suddenly we have 80 platforms or like 80 different tasks that we're responsible for, and we don't even really know what we're supposed to be focusing on, and we can't find the stuff that we really need to do. And so I joke that we do the CEO purse dump, where we dump out all of the tasks, software, and responsibilities that you are currently focused on in your business. I'm talking everything from like taxes to posting on social media to sending invoices to managing interns. Literally every single task you focus on in your business. And most times when I tell people that, they're like, okay, I'm going to pause right now and write out the list of 90 million things that I focus on, because most business owners, they're doing a lot more every day than they realize. And so that's that first step, is literally just getting everything that you focus on in your business for like a week or a month at a time onto that piece of paper. That's the first thing. Okay.
So with that, like, would you suggest people kind of follow themselves around with the sheet of paper all week, or like a one-time brain dump, or either?
Yeah. So I usually start with that one-time brain dump, just whatever's in my head. But then I'll actually have my clients for a month either look back at their calendar and see everything that was on their calendar. If there's someone like myself or you, or it's like we put all the things that we're doing, like even if it's just internal, like I'll put it on my calendar. If you're a person like that, you can just look back at the month that you've had and it's like, what are all the things that I did? Or, time track and say like every hour, what was I doing in my business? And you start to realize, one, all the things you're doing, but also some of the things that maybe you shouldn't be doing that you're spending a ton of time on that you just didn't realize.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. You're right. You're a calendar person like me, which everyone listening probably knows. I'm obsessed with the calendar, but yes, like I could easily look back and kind of see that for myself, but I love that. So like the CEO purse dump. So everyone's writing out what all you're doing in your business. Okay. Now, once we have the list, what do we do after that first step? Number 1.
Yeah, this is technically the first step, because that was just like compiling everything. To me, that's like, not really action that's helpful. But the second step is to look at that list in total, look at everything on that list and ask yourself, is this essential or revenue generating? So for example, people will be like, well, reviewing my statements for my taxes isn't revenue generating, but it is an essential thing. We have to do it for our business. So an example of something people frequently like cross off that list is they'll watch a webinar maybe for like, Pinterest. They've been on Pinterest for 6 months. They haven't gotten a single lead from Pinterest, and it's not essential that they're on Pinterest. That's something that maybe we can cross off our list if it's not generating revenue for us and it's not essential. You'll be shocked at when you actually lay the things out and all the things that we're doing, how many things are not essential and not revenue generating that we're spending time on. And I'm a big believer that like, if it's not doing those 2 things, it's really important for us to ask, like, why is it on my plate as a business owner? What's the opportunity cost that I'm wasting by focusing time on these things when they're really not generating revenue or essential for my business to exist?
Yeah. And that example with Pinterest is a great example, because like for me, Pinterest is revenue generating and makes sense. But a lot of people could see my business or someone else's who Pinterest is beneficial and be like, okay, I have to be on Pinterest, but it might not be for them.
Exactly. I mean, that happens all the time. Like, for example, I'm recently obsessed with TikTok and I love TikTok. I've actually gotten business from TikTok and that's great. But I know some other individuals who've gotten on TikTok. It hasn't generated any revenue for them, but they're keeping it on their list because they're like, it's working for Kate or it's working for this other, service provider. And it's like, we have to look at our own per stump and say what's working and what's not, and get super honest with ourselves, because we'll find ourselves spending time on these things, sometimes for years, that aren't helping our business at all and are costing us ultimately from focusing on that thing that is bringing in revenue and is a lead generator for us.
Yeah, TikTok's a great example of that, and the Reels right now, which I still have not done either. I've not done a TikTok or a Reel, and I'm like, that actually feels like the reason for me, because I've seen people like y'all are so cute on it and you're doing great, but I'm like, I don't know if like I want to do that right now, if that's like where I need to focus my energy. So yeah, I like that thought though, of like what's not essential, not revenue generating for you.
For you. And that is such a big piece of it, because we will often operate as our like ideal self. We're like, oh, well, like if my business was going in an ideal way, then like I would be doing all of these things. And we're not kind of based in like, what's the reality of right now? And what do I need to be focused on right now to move the needle? And then maybe eventually, once I have this stuff streamlined and systematized, I can move on and test that new thing. But we're not going to do that until we have the systems and processes in place to manage and grow the business that we already have.
Okay. I love that. So, okay, once everyone has CEO per stumped, they've ditched, crossed off what doesn't make money or is not essential. Okay, what is the next step?
The next thing is to scan that list and look for everything that can be automated. So I like to say everything that a robot can do. And most times that list is very long of things that we're doing that ultimately can be done by a robot. So the reason why I do it per stump style and why it's so essential to do that dump piece of it is because oftentimes my clients or people that I talk to, they'll say, okay, well, I need to send invoices. I'm going to look for a platform that just does that. Or I need to send emails to my clients. So I'm going to look for a platform that just does that. And what that does is it leaves us with 80 platforms and we're still jumping across. And from like, you're onboarding a client, you're jumping to 12 different platforms instead of looking at that CEO per stump and saying, okay, I have 20 things that can be automated. Let me look for a platform that can do most of these things. So for example, I know we're both big fans of Dubsado. And it's like Dubsado does so many of the things that I saw on my list. Like I need to send contracts, I need to send invoices, I need my clients to access a portal, I need them to see the progress of their project, I need an onboarding email to be sent automatically. I knew these were all things that could be automated. I could have found 12 other platforms to do it, or this one-stop shop solution that does all of it for me. So when people will say like, oh, I think I need a system for this, this, and this, I'm like, well, let's put all of it on a piece of paper, look at the available systems to us, which ones are best for doing the most tasks on this list that it possibly can. So I joke that I'm like the queen of doing the most with the least. So like I want to have the least amount of logins. I want to have the least amount of places to go. And I want to have the least amount of places for my clients to go. I don't want my clients to be on DocuSign and, invoice on Stripe, and then emails are here, but sometimes we're texting and sometimes we're calling each other. It's like that makes for a not so great client experience. So this part is not just automating it for you, but automating it for your clients as well. And the question I get so often is, well, am I going to feel sleazy or feel robotic if I automate so many things in my business? And I always say the gut check I do when I'm thinking about automating something is, if my client knew that a robot did this, would they be upset? So there are certain things that like maybe, writing them an email, updating them about their project, they probably don't want a robot to do that. They probably want something custom from me that's explaining the status of their project. But I guarantee you, I haven't had one client that cares that their invoice is sent automatically, or that, they get an automated response from me when they submit an inquiry. Like no one's, losing sleep over that. And so ask yourself, like the people that are on the other side of this automation, is it hurting them, or are they going to be upset, or is it helping them? Like my clients would rather have things automated because it's getting to them quicker. It's actually helping them. And so it's important to think about that opportunity cost when it's like, if we're scared to automate because we feel like it's robotic, what are we losing out on with the time that we're spending doing those repetitive tasks every day?
Yes, I'm all about the automation. So I love all that. And one thing too that like, for me, I do less of it now, but like when I've been primarily a service provider, one piece of feedback I've gotten from clients a lot is that they learned about systems and automation through going through my process and saw like, oh wait, I remember one time I had a client say, I should not be sending my own invoice due reminders because I was using Dubsado to automate to them on a schedule. Like, okay, 3 days before it's due, they get an email. And it's like, you're really giving your clients, like you're saying, a better experience and possibly helping them like quit doing stupid stuff they don't need to be doing in their business.
Elizabeth, it's so funny that you say that because the amount of people, like I got married this past year and every single one of my vendors either inquired about or ended up booking my services because they were like going through like a process of mine or like seeing something on mine. They're like, oh, wait, like how does this work? How do you have like all of our emails in this one specific place? Or I'll have clients that say like, ooh, I see that you have a portal. Can we do that for our business? And so there are so many people I work with from like accountants, lawyers, graphic designers, whomever it is, that end up seeing my system and doing the same thing. They're like, what system is that? How did you do that? How did you build that? And that's one of the really cool unintended consequences of it.
I love that. Yeah. And with that one of automating, is there something you can think of that like, that maybe listeners might not be thinking they could automate, that you're like, people should be thinking of this one, but it might be a little less obvious?
Absolutely. I mean, there are quite a few. The first one that people think they can't automate, but they can, is canned email templates.
Yeah.
So I think so many people are saying, well, I can't, automate a response to this, or like, I can't automate a response for this. And so I think having those canned templates, and it's that cool hybrid mix of canned and custom, I technically mark it as automated because it takes me less time, or it's something I eventually end up outsourcing. And so it feels like very automated to me. Other things are things that you do maybe once a year that you don't realize don't need to require your time. So for example, like every year around tax time, I used to, like in 2014, 2015, like collect all of my paper receipts or try and file them in a folder. And so finding a system like HubDoc where I can scan all of my receipts throughout the year and have that automatically be filed for me and automatically sent to my accountant, something like that, where it's so small in the grand scheme of things, but I have receipts almost every day in my business where I'm purchasing something or paying a subscription. And now that's completely automated where my accountant can start working on my taxes immediately and I don't have to think about it. Those things I think are so big. And so I think about those hybrid tasks, but then also the tasks you maybe do less frequently, but are ultimately super important, like making sure your finances are in order. That's huge, but you might not be doing it every day to where you feel like, oh, like I should have a system for this, but ultimately it's going to save you maybe 10 hours in one day from like not having to categorize those receipts.
Yeah. I need to check out what was it called again? The tax one you were just mentioning?
HubDoc.
Okay,
so it's
HubDoc.
Cool. Yeah, there's a lot of platforms that are kind of similar to it. Okay. But the thing that I like about HubDoc, this is really going to show my like nerdy systems side, is that when it scans your receipt, it will categorize that receipt by date, amount, and vendor. So like if I'm like, hey, I went to Walgreens, I don't remember like when that was or how much I paid them, like I can actually search in my Google Drive like Walgreens and it'll pull up all of the receipts from Walgreens. Or I'll say like, hey, I don't have any expenses from like April 10th. Did I purchase something that day? I can type in April 10th and it'll pull up every receipt from that day. So it categorizes it by all of those. It's like such a nerdy thing that for most people, they're probably like, well, why would you even want to do that? But as someone, my like two greatest fears as a business owner is like getting in trouble with the IRS or getting in trouble like, legally in any way. Yeah. So those are the two things that I'm always like, I have to have a system where like if the IRS shows up at my door and is like, ma'am, we need a receipt from April 10th, 2008. I'm like, I have it. Here it is.
Yes. So, I need to check that out. I mean, for me right now I agree. I have that fear, but had not been as good about receipts until literally this year. But I keep a folder. This is a less legit version of what you just said, but I will share it. But I keep a folder always in my downloads that's called receipts for the month. And every time like, some software I use like Basecamp or something like that, when they send me the invoice, I just download it, drag to that folder, and then at the end of the month, I put all of those by categories into their folder in Google Drive for my bookkeeper. And then she puts it all where it needs to go. But that's been helpful to me of like just a fast way versus at the end of the month, I could be like, let me search for all of these different things. It's like, just as I get them, I do them.
Totally. And that honestly, it's like whatever automating it looks like to you, people will often ask me, they're like, what's the best platform for this? And I'm like, there's no best, there's a best for you and what works for you. Like I'm obsessed with Dubsado. Some people love HoneyBook. It's totally a preference call, but there's no best. It's like, how does it work best for me in the way that I like to work? Okay, that's how I'm going to streamline and simplify this.
Yes. And with that, people need to like remember to not spend forever trying to pick the platform. Like with project management softwares especially, I just talked about that recently in an episode, but like there's Asana, there's Basecamp, there's ClickUp, there's Trello, like there's Monday.com, there's 1,000 of them, and you could spend an entire year trying each one and then like never actually get a system in place because you're just like shopping each one and setting up a system in it. And so it's better just to pick one, you know?
Yes. Pick one and start. Like, that's what I always, like, people will ask me. I got this email literally today, probably about an hour ago. Someone was like, tell me why you switched back from ClickUp to Asana. And I'm like, what I really want to tell you is like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Like, you know, find the one that feels good to you. And for me, it's really, this is probably sad, but it's such a visual thing. I'm like, what do I feel excited to use? I just feel like Asana is a little bit more clean, and the way that I personally use it for my business and the way that my team members use it, it works better for us. But that's not to say that like Basecamp, Trello, they all have their perks. You have to find the one that you like find first essentially and make it work for you. And if you find a real problem, then switch, but just ultimately do what you're supposed to be doing, which is, you know, making progress on your project.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, like right now we use Basecamp, but we've also used Monday.com. We've also used Trello, and I don't think I've ever tried Asana, but I've used it. Am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. I am. Okay. I feel like I always am like, I'm not sure how, because I always want to say it the yoga way, but I hear people pronounce it differently than that anyway. But I've tried, you know, all the different ones at different times and used them for seasons. So it's like, I'm also like, I don't really know like which one's best for you. Like they're all great. So yeah.
That's so true. Yeah. They're all very different. I mean, I still put clients on different ones than I am. I put a client on Monday.com yesterday, and it's like, this is best for you, or what I think you'll like best. But ultimately, getting the project done is the most important thing.
Yes. Okay. So we automate things. So we're looking at the list. We take things that can be done by the robot and work on getting them automated. Now, what's the next step?
Yeah. So hopefully your list is looking a little smaller. You're like categorizing things, taking it off. So now when we look at the list, if it can't be automated, if it's not automatically going to happen, the next step is to see what can be outsourced. So what can I have someone else do? What can I delegate? What can I maybe have a virtual assistant do? And so frequently the question I get is, well, what does that look like? How do I know what can be outsourced? What does that mean? And for me, it's one of three categories. Something I hate doing that keeps going to the bottom of my list because I hate doing it. The rule I have is if it's on my list for longer than 90 days, it has to be outsourced. I have to find someone to do it because I'm not going to do it. The next is things I shouldn't be doing because it's not worth my time. So like I technically could be responding to all of our, you know, customer service emails. Is it the best use of my time when I could be creating our next, like, you know, $1 million product? Like, no, that's probably not the best use of my time. And then the next thing is stuff I don't have the skill to do. So like, for example, building a website, you know, like if I don't have that skill, it's not worth it for me to sit, you know, on the back end of Show It by myself and tinker. I either need to buy a template or hire someone to do this for me because it's not the best use of my time. So those are really the three things that I check on my list to say, how, like, who can I have do this for me or with me to make sure I'm making progress on the things that really matter to me. And again, just like the automation piece, I will look at that and sometimes come up with a full job description. Like some of them are one-off things that I need one person to do. But ultimately, like if you're thinking about hiring a virtual assistant or an online business manager or something like that, you can look at that list and say, okay, I need to outsource 7 of these things. Let me put that in the job description for the person I'm going to hire. So maybe I need a virtual assistant who also has a background in copywriting, or maybe I need a virtual assistant who also has a background in graphics and can make all my Instagram graphics. And so you start to compile that job description and you can really find the best person for your business when, again, you do that dump style and say, okay, here are the 12 things I need to outsource. What's the best way to maximize my hires and maximize my expenses if I have one person who can do more than one of these things?
Yeah. I love that. Those 3 things. So something we hate, we shouldn't be doing, or we don't have the skill for. And I think when you said all those, the thing of those, I think is probably the hardest for people to outsource is the thing they shouldn't be doing, but can do. So they might not even love it. It's just kind of like, I have the ability to do this. I know for me in my business, that was the hardest stuff to let go of. And I think a lot of times it's because we want the control. We think we're the only person that can do it, which is typically not true. It might hurt our feelings when we realize oh, someone else can actually do this better or the same as me. But yeah, it's a good one to really pay attention to, I think, of what should you just not be doing, what's not the best use of your time. And it's interesting too, because sometimes it can feel easier to just keep doing it anyway, because it's hard to find someone to fill it. And it's work to do that. It can feel oh, it's less work for me to just do it myself right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that, like you said, it's the number one thing that my clients struggle with. The phrase that I hear so often when we're in hour 7 of building systems, they're I'll just do it. Don't worry about putting together a system for that, or don't put a standard operating procedure together for that. I'll just do it. And anytime they say that, I really remind them of, I frequently talk about this difference between being an employee in your business and being a CEO in your business. Mm-hmm. And so many people initially in their business, they operate like an employee because they have to do everything. You at least need to learn how to do everything, set up everything, or it's essential because you don't have the funds to hire someone. But as we kind of step into that business owner CEO role, we realize that our time is best spent doing the thing we do best, or actually operating like a CEO. So I'm essentially supposed to be managing or overseeing all of the things that are running and seeing how to optimize them, seeing new revenue streams, things that aren't necessarily tangible, but can make $1 million difference in your business if you focus on them strategically. So the question I always ask my clients is if you spend 2 hours a day doing this thing, what are you giving up? Yeah. What are you missing out on? And that, even if it's playing with your kids, even if it's couch time with your husband, it's is that worth $30 an hour to you? Of course, that's a no-brainer. Yeah. And so in that way, I always want to set up my clients for success. And a lot of that's just documenting how it's done, documenting that system, and making sure it's documented in a way that someone else can take it over. But not outsourcing that is keeping us stuck and holding us back in ways that we're not even seeing at the time.
Yes, it's so true. And, okay, with documenting, is there a particular way you like to teach people to do that, or a software or anything you use for it?
Absolutely. So my favorite way to do it is Loom. So Loom is a screen recording platform that I know you're familiar with. So what I'll actually do, because a lot of times, and I see this with a lot of business owners as well, where they've done it maybe 180 times before. And so when we go to write down the steps, we actually subconsciously skip them because we know the steps. We can just do it with our mouse, 12 clicks. But even a step of logging in, here's the password. We're oh, wait, the fact that we have to give them a password, we forgot about that. And so Loom kind of makes sure that we don't skip any steps and you actually physically walk them through it on Loom. And then from there, sometimes I'll write out steps in a project management system and have those steps documented. And actually I have templates for my clients and some of my students where I have kind of standard, what I call SOPs, standard operating procedure. And so I'm here's a batch of 12 of them, onboarding a client, scheduling a newsletter, posting on social media. Here are the generic steps, and you can tailor it towards yourself. But I find it's helpful to keep all of those in one place. I have an SOP board on my Asana team project. And so having that board where anytime I onboard someone, I automatically bring them into the SOP. That way, let's say Madison, my virtual assistant, is sick and Ashley, who helps us out sometimes, needs to come on. I don't have to spend the whole day teaching her how to use our newsletter system or what steps she needs to go through. It's on Asana where she can see all of those steps, and I can actually see in real time if she's updating them. So she can watch the video, and then the steps are also in that template where if I'm grabbing coffee in between meetings, I can look on Asana and be like, okay, she's 4 steps into the 7-step process. I kind of know without even having to ask her how much of this has been done.
I love that. And with like something I've done is, even if you're not like, I'm hiring right now to fill this role, you can go ahead and like one of the times that you're going to do the task and you're like, okay, I have a little extra time to like make this take longer because I'm explaining how to do it on Loom, and just do that. And then it's going to be there ready to go whenever you do hire someone to do the thing. And for me, I have Abby in my business does a whole lot of stuff for this podcast. And I actually recorded all the training stuff for her on what to do from the start to end for an episode before she was hired. So the videos, I'm never addressing her directly, but I did them on Loom, made it a process for it. And she watched it as like her onboarding for that piece of everything.
I mean, that is so brilliant. That's exactly what you should be doing. And that's thinking like a CEO. Like it's thinking like, I'm a business owner. I'm eventually going to have people helping me. How can I prepare for that? And the motto that I have in my business, we always say, work hard once. So basically, like if we're doing anything more than once, we have the motto, work hard once, only do it once, document it, and have it where it can be repeated or repurposed for you automatically. And so if you're going to do anything in your business twice, record it. Might as well record it. Keep it in your SOP board or in an SOP folder on Google Drive, and have it so that when that time comes, like for me, I was in the hospital. I didn't have any of that prepared. Like my business came to a crashing halt. And so we want to ask ourselves that question. Like you said, maybe we're not hiring today, but maybe something happens tomorrow where I need someone to take over. Maybe it's even like my husband needs to take over. How does he know what we're supposed to be doing as a business? And really that onus lies on you as the business owner.
Yes. I love that. Okay. So that was third step. We want to outsource. Now let's talk about the last step.
Final step. This is my favorite step. So if you're looking at your purse dump now and you have more than 5 things on your list, there's probably something you missed that can be automated or outsourced. That's just usually, I've worked with, thousands of business owners at this point. That's just usually the case, is that we're trying to hold on to something that doesn't really deserve our time. So maybe go back through step 3 if you do have more than maybe 5 or 6 things on that list. But if you have 5 things on that list, after what you do is batch. And Elizabeth, I know that you do this and you do this well, where you dedicate a certain amount of time. For me, it's a full day. I dedicate each day of my week to certain types of tasks. So whether that's marketing, whether that's client work, whether that's building new packages or products or services, I dedicate a full day to that task. And every time I share about batching, everyone's like, I can't do that. I like that you don't understand. That doesn't work with my schedule. And so we'll talk through it, like, why doesn't that work? What do people need from you? And usually that's a conversation about boundary and expectation setting. So we're making ourselves so available to our clients, our peers, our team, or whoever it is. We're making ourselves so available that we don't even feel in control of our time. Like we feel like we can't even use our time in the way we want to because of everyone else's agenda. And so what I really encourage people to do is really, again, step out of that employee mindset and step into that business owner mindset of like, I'm in control here. I'm, directing this ship. What is best for this business is best for me. And so for me, it's all about expectation setting. And my clients know this. It's like, if you email me, you'll get a response back that's automated that says, thanks, I check emails on Thursdays. Like, can't wait to talk to you then. It's going to be awesome. Or maybe Madison's in there doing that for me. But again, if I have a full day to work on Instagram content, I can schedule it for 90 days, or I can create some really amazing, helpful, thoughtful posts because I'm not waking up every morning thinking, oh gosh, I have to post on Instagram today. What do I post? I had a full day to think through, a whole quarter worth of Instagram posts. And so when people ask, they're like, how are you able to get so much done in such a little amount of time? It's because I don't task switch. It's because I don't jump from one thing to the other. I'm focused on one task. And when I do that, I realize like, oh, it actually doesn't take that much time to do this thing. I was just trying to do that in between a call here, a text here, an email here, something that was urgent for someone else. And so I think it's so important for us to remember that as business owners, we really own our time. And it's to the betterment of our clients and our business that we're thoughtful about how we're spending that time.
Yes. And one thing too that makes me think of is like, I heard an analogy recently about taking off and landing a plane. Of the hardest part is taking off and landing, right? And that's the same way with tasks. Like if your whole day is you take off on a task, you land on a task, take off, land, write a social media post. Now I got to respond to an email. Now I'm going to work on this project. It's just, you don't have any momentum. But so when you do what Kate's saying of like, I'm going to spend an entire day or even a half day, if that feels like too much for you, like you're going to get momentum, and then it might be hard to stop. That happens to me when I do, like, I recently did a day where the whole day, all I did was work on a client project, and it felt hard taking off. I'm like, oh, this is like, if it's hard starting, but then I literally was like, I can't put this down, you know?
Absolutely. And sometimes I get a little crazy with it. Sometimes I'll say like, okay, I'm taking a whole week. I'm like taking off from my business. I'm going to stay in a hotel in town and just like work on this thing. And I'm like driving on the way there and I'm like, oh, I really don't want to do this. I could be responding to that email. This person asked me to do this thing for them. I could be doing that. I get in that hotel room and I start working on it. And every single service or product I've put out that's been incredibly successful has been a product of me focusing, tuning everything else out, making the best quality product that I possibly can, and then getting super excited about it to the point where I'm like, okay, now I want to market it. Now I want to like put all these other pieces to it, where at first I was like dragging my feet to even do it. And if I had to do one small piece of it every day, I'd probably feel like that constantly.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And okay, a question for you, because I know you do this really well. Could you tell us like a sneak into your calendar right now? Like what did you do this week for like implementing this batching idea?
Absolutely. So I'm someone who needs that to be almost done for me. Like I don't want to be left to my own devices every morning to see if I want to follow my batching schedule or not. So I actually block it off in my calendar every single week, the same things every week. Okay. So like every Monday is marketing for me. I work on my Instagram posts. I work on my newsletters. I work on TikToks. I work on all these different things. And so when people are like, oh my gosh, you're doing reels, you're doing TikToks, you're doing this. I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing it just all in one day. Like for me, it's like marketing's on Mondays and like, that's what happens. And then, so I have it already blocked off on my schedule. And then also I set up like my scheduler to only allow people to schedule times on days where I take client calls. So my client days are Tuesdays. And so my clients can only schedule on Tuesdays. And so that's when they meet with me and that works for them. And then I'm either doing products or, product promotion, or like, today is like mastermind calls, podcasts, IG Live. So I'm either promoting a product or working on a product. And so if anyone reaches out to me for like a podcast or a call or like wanting to promote something, I'm doing that today. And so for me, it starts to become really easy. Like I actually label at the top of my calendar, like Wednesdays are for this, so that like if I'm out in the wild and someone's like, hey, let's get lunch next week, I'm like, okay, I can get lunch with people on Fridays. Like Fridays are a great day. So I'm out in the wild and I'm like, let's do Friday, and I'll check my calendar and see like, okay, when's the next available Friday? Instead of saying like, what day is best for you? Oh, Wednesday. Well, normally I would do podcasts on Wednesdays, but I have to go to lunch. And so it just keeps everything really clean, but it's all coming back to expectation setting and boundaries. Yeah. And the best thing you can do is put systems in place where it's not even a decision you have to make. Because I think some of us are tempted, like if a client emails us, they're like, I need to reschedule, what time's best for you? We're tempted to be like, oh, anytime next week, or like, what's best for you? And it's like, actually I meet with clients on Tuesdays, so is next Tuesday or the following Tuesday good for you? Yeah. And so it's just about that language. And and people think you have to be like rude to have boundaries. And I'm like, I'm from the South. Like I pride myself on being, like thoughtful and respectful and responsive. And so I'll set up systems that allow me to do that. But ultimately, I'm not going to make anyone else's agenda more important than my own or what needs to get done in my business, because that's ultimately, again, a disservice to my clients and to my business. And so I actually label each day of the calendar as like marketing, client work, calls, promotion, what have you. And then I set up my scheduler or my virtual assistant accordingly. So if she's responding on my behalf, she'll say, we only do these things on Wednesdays. What Wednesday is good for you?
Yeah. And I see you're right that it's like we think it's offensive, but it's not. Like, you scheduled this interview on a Wednesday. I never would have known like, oh, Kate only does Wednesdays. Like you didn't say that to me. You were just looked at the options and like took Wednesday. And I guess like that's another like quick follow up, but like, if I had not had Wednesday available, what would you have done?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will then, if it's like, I'm not going to be like, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I'll never do your podcast because you aren't available on Wednesdays. I'll say, okay, what are my internal days versus my external days?
Okay.
And so, for example, I have client calls or client work on Tuesdays. To me, that's external. Like I'm showing up on video, I'm calling, I'm not doing things internally. So I would then schedule with you on that day. Whereas like my Mondays are like so sacred to me. I'm like, I'm just getting back from the weekend. I don't really want to talk to anyone. I don't want to hop on any calls. Like that's just a day where like I'm out. Like I'm not doing calls that day. So to me, I'll think about what type of task is it, and is it internal, like for me to work on a process or maybe do like something where I don't have to engage with anyone, versus an external day where it's like, okay, if this is a day where I would typically do interviews, but a client needs to move because her kids are going back to school or whatever it is. Okay, well, this is an external day. If I have a gap in there, we can reschedule. So you don't have to be militant about it, obviously. Like we live in a world that like, things change, especially this year, like things are a little bit crazy, but I like for that to be the exception and not the rule so that I can get more done, because I find that ultimately I then have a lot more time to organize my schedule in the way that I want, because my clients know, like they'll call me and they'll say like, hey, I know you're usually like a Tuesday person. So I rescheduled for like 3 weeks from today when maybe, I would have taken them on a Wednesday had I had time, but they just get in the habit of like, oh, this is how Kate likes to work. And so I'm going to accommodate that. And so you'll find most people are more than willing to do that. But if not, I think about, is it an internal task or an external task? And I like to have internal days and external days personally.
Yeah, I think I haven't ever called it internal, external. I'm going to start calling it that though. But I do that because I think about getting ready for the day. Today is an external day for me because I'm wearing clothes, normal clothes. And I always wear clothes, but you know what I mean. I'm not wearing, I actually did have on shorts, but I put on real pants for this interview and then my shirt. But, it's nice to have days where you don't have to get ready. And that's one of the perks I think of being like an online business owners. We don't have to get ready and go into an office. But if you're scheduling a meeting every single day that requires you to be on video and in person, then you're going to have to get ready on your A game every day.
Exactly. And for me, that feels like the most taxing thing. I would so much rather have a full day where I'm top bun, sweatpants, on the couch, just grinding, getting things out. And then today I did, an Instagram live with someone I'm doing a partnership with. I'm doing this podcast with you. I had 2 of my mastermind calls this day. And you'll find most times it's like when you go to a restaurant and everyone's like, where should we go? If you're the person to be like, let's do Wednesday, most people will follow that. And so I find that's my favorite thing to do is suggest a day or a time, and then have those days where I'm like, okay, I knocked out all the stuff I had to do externally today, and I get to sit in my sweatpants for the rest of the week. And I'm just thrilled about that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm seriously going to do all these steps myself. So I wasn't necessarily thinking I was going to do that after hearing all your tips, but I'm yes, I'm going to after this start on that first one of ditching by writing all the things out. And just to remind you guys to walk through these again, I of course re-listen and look at the show notes as well, but doing the CEO per stump, automating, outsourcing. The last one was batching. So thank you for all of these. And I had another question for you that really relates, but you've shared somewhat recently on Instagram and really multiple times about how you work typically a 4-hour day and are able to have a 6-figure a year business. So some people are like, wait, that's insane. How do you do that? So what would be a tip to someone who's that sounds amazing. How do I do that?
Yeah, what's really funny about the steps that I just shared is I'll do that once a quarter because things creep onto that list. And what really changed my mindset about how much time I needed to work in my business to achieve the goals I wanted to achieve was this thing I read about in a book by Ben Hardy, who I just feel is a genius and a really cool person. He wrote about this concept called Parkinson's law, where basically he says the task we have at hand expands to the time we've allotted for it. So essentially, if you've set aside 3 months to build a course, or you've set aside 1 week, whichever one you've set aside, it's going to take that long to do that thing. So I think because so many of us assume, especially as business owners, that it's if I'm not working from the time I'm supposed to be up in the morning to midnight, then I'm not a business owner or hustling or grinding or doing what I'm supposed to do. And, that was my thought for a long time, really until I had my hospital incident and I only had 4 hours in a day. Like I didn't have the energy to be working more than that. And so I found like, okay, if I only have 4 hours, if I abide by Parkinson's law and I only give myself 4 hours, what are the most important things that I need to prioritize in those 4 hours? And when you do that, you realize you only focus on those needle moving essential tasks and you get them done quickly. And so really it's so much about like, again, doing that first dump and realizing like, oh, I in my head was working for 8 hours today, but an hour was spent like thinking about what font to use. Another hour was spent thinking about like what project management system to use. Another hour was spent diving into my competitors' websites and if they're doing something better than me. And then 30 minutes was actually writing the Instagram post. Yeah. So it's like, okay, like if you compiled everything you did and thought about what is like the revenue generating, like money making, needle moving activities I do in my business, I would be shocked if it took you more than 16 hours a week. Depending on, like obviously if you have team members, maybe you need to meet with them, what have you. But for me, my goal is to do all of my money making activities in 4 hours and then do what I want to do. So like I'll frequently have people say, they're like, ooh, like I saw you working after 3 o'clock today. Like you're not doing your 4 hour thing. And I'm like, if I want to work on something, obviously I'm going to have the liberty to do that. But I've also already hit 6 figures for the year. And so I have like 4 more months to do kind of, if that's your metric, if that's your mark of success, then you can do whatever you want to do after that. And so for me, it's really about making sure that those 4 hours each day are spent on money-making, revenue-generating tasks, which usually can be done in like 30 minutes, to be honest with you. But like 4 hours is a great metric and something that like just feels maybe good to people who can work a half day, but also realizing that so many people confuse urgent things with important things. And it's like, we have a client in our inbox that's asking about an update on their website. It's like, I'm going to focus on making sure like my business is set before I address any of those other things, or maybe it's something that can wait like 48 hours, but instead of allowing ourselves to do the important things, we do the urgent things. And so batching is really such a big piece of this. And it makes all the difference when you're thinking about that 4 hour workday, where it's like, if I have 4 dedicated, focused hours to work on something, I'm going to get it done and I'm going to get it done well. And I'll be able to like move on and feel successful. But if I spent 4 hours in my inbox or 4 hours on the discovery page on Instagram, of course, I'm going to have to do more work after that. Like that's just like, we haven't done the things that we need to do to keep our business running. And so that's again, why that first dump is so important, because it really opens our eyes to like, what are the 4 or 5 things that I, as the CEO, should be focusing on? And what are things that I could automate, outsource, or really just get off my list entirely that aren't serving me? So like, again, it's always about boundaries and expectations. But now my team knows like, this is how I like to work. This is the priority I have. And so when they see me like hiking in Montana or like on a girls trip in Sedona, they're like, yeah, like that's how she set this up. And that feels fine to us.
I love that. And with thinking about like how you were saying all those random things that we spend our day doing that aren't moving the needle forward, I think a lot of times that happens because we got used to working as an employee and we think we're supposed to work this many hours a day, so I'm going to fill it even if the work's not there. But something that's helpful to me, and I've talked to many people about this, but like tracking, even if it's just for a week or a month, your time, clocking in and out on Toggle is what I use for it. So I'll categorize, I'm emailing, I'm recording a podcast, I'm working on client work. So then when I'm like, okay, let me go on Instagram and just scroll or do something like what you said of like looking at someone else's website when it's not relevant to anything I was supposed to do that day, it forces you to be like, I should technically clock out right now. And then it really gets your mind of like, wait, that's not the right thing to be working on.
Exactly. I mean, I joke with my husband about this all the time. He's like, oh, today was such a long work day. I'm like, what'd you do? And he's like, I had a call. Yeah. I'm like, your call was 30 minutes, sir. Like, what were you doing the rest of the day? And he's like, well, I was like thinking about reorganizing my inbox. And it's like, okay, there are things we can do. But if we wanted to work a 4-hour workday, we could. Yeah. We're just kind of choosing not to. And you're absolutely right. We have that employee mindset of like whoever sits in their chair longest wins kind of mentality. Yeah. But when you're a business owner, like that's the perk. Why not take advantage of the fact that like you can get things done efficiently and effectively and move on? And honestly, my clients who do it the best are usually like moms or someone with multiple businesses where they say like, I don't have all day to be kind of lollygagging on the internet. I know plenty of my clients who have, 6-figure, 7-figure businesses that work less sometimes than me, but they just have their systems in a way that they automate and outsource the things that they don't need. And they make 3 big decisions a day and they're out. And like, it can be that way, but only if you set it up intentionally to be that way.
Yeah. And it's also like, it depends on, for me, of like with my template shop, I could absolutely, if that's all I'm going to do right now, make multiple 6 figures and not work that much. Cause it's like, it's doing its thing on its own. But then I'm always like, I want to start this other thing. So like right now I'm in that kind of place in my business, which I think is something that's like, I've talked about this before, but like building a bridge of one thing and get it working perfectly to a T. And that's how I feel like, they're not perfect and I'm always going to be adding to them, but the template shop is working. And now I'm working on something else, which does take away from like the time off. But then it's like the templates are doing its own thing and generating revenue while I can go work on this other thing. So,
and like, make no mistake, like, I think people assume when they see a video from me, they're like, oh, she doesn't want to work. She's trying to work as little as possible. And it's like, I'm trying to work as little as possible on the things that I don't need to work on. But I mean, yeah, you can ask my virtual assistant, anyone on my team, like, I'll be like up at 2 a.m. in the project management system because I'm excited about a new idea or like something came to me and I'm like, oh, like I want to do this. And I just recently, like one of our signature programs, totally scrapped it and built it from scratch. And my team was like, wait, like that's like actively making money. What are you doing? And I'm like, I have a new idea for it and I want to remake it. But like, that to me is so optional and like not essential for me making 6 figures. In fact, like it's not being sold right now. And like, we're still on track to hit the revenue goals that we have. But that doesn't mean like, oh, at 3 p.m. I'm like, drop the mouse, like step away, like can't work anymore. It's like, I just want to be optional and I want you to have the freedom and flexibility to work in the way you do. And I just can't imagine any service-based business where you need to be working more than 4 hours a day to be making 6 figures if you're focused on the right things.
Yeah.
And if you find that that's not possible, again, we need to go back through that whole exercise of automate, outsource, and batch, and what are we spending our time on? Because ultimately there's probably a leak there or an inefficiency there that we could tighten up to allow you to do that.
Yeah. I'm excited I'm literally going to make my list once we're off this call. So I'm really excited. I hope everyone listening will like actually do the work of this instead of just listening to us talk about it, because literally all of that's not going to help you unless you make the list to start. So you have to do the work of it. Kate, this has been amazing. And I have some rapid fire questions for you relating to just all kinds of fun things that I'd love to ask you about. So the first one, what's your favorite non-work related way, the thing you're doing when you're not working, to have fun and relax and unwind?
I am like such a spa day person. I used to not be, but I'm someone now that will like, there's a local hotel here that has a spa where if you get a treatment, you can kind of stay all day in your bathrobe and like hang out. And I find for me, and actually one of my mentors too, like if I'm on the massage table and just like kind of daydreaming about my business, that's when I have my best ideas actually. Yeah. So it's funny. It's like the time you have off, you're thinking about your business, but in a different way. So spa days are like a long walk. Like I'll listen to a podcast and go on a really long walk. And that's just one of my favorite ways to decompress.
We're like literally the same. That's like literally, I feel like that's how I would answer both those. I love the walk and podcast, and I also love a spa day. So that's amazing. Spa days are something I do to celebrate launches. I'll do like a spa day as like a after it and book it beforehand so that I actually go to it. I didn't get to do one for my last launch because of COVID, but yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Favorite business book that you'd recommend we read?
This is probably very on brand and obvious for me, but the book is Essentialism by Greg McGowan. And it really is like the ethos of everything that I believe in my business, of like focusing on the essential things, the things that you need to do to really grow your business. And every single concept in that book is like, you know, my North Star of like what I try and do every single day. So that's a great one.
I need to read that one. I've heard multiple people mention that. Okay. A software or tool for your business that we might not have heard of that we should know about.
There's so many that I really love. I will say, like, if you're a creative person and you like having both a project management system and something to help you kind of like vision board or like mood board or like have a visual of what your project's going to be like. There's a project management system called Milanote that really is like a great combination of those two. It's a little bit like offbeat. It's not one of your typical like Trello, Asana, Basecamp. It's not like, the usual suspects, but visually, if you're someone that really likes to consume content and like see a project, like it would be laid out on like a whiteboard or like a cork board, that is a great system that I think so many of my creative clients really, really love to use.
That's cool.
So that's kind of like an offbeat one. That's a good kind of mix of like Pinterest and project management.
Okay, very cool. And we'll link to that in the show notes. Okay, and then last question, a productivity tool of sorts that you're into that we should check out.
I mean, my like tried and true, and I've like tried, when I say I've tried every project management system, it's like embarrassing how much time I've like spent trying all of them. But I have to say like something about Asana in the way that they like now, continued to innovate on that platform is just designed for me to get stuff done. And when, again, it's a little bit like when you use the system, it works, like you have to work it for it to work. I like assign dates to everything, assign team members to everything, colors, like all of it. I just kind of go all in. And that is like my tried and true app for like, there's not a thing I do in this world that is not on my project management system. Like my whole honeymoon was like mapped out on a project management system.
I love it.
I'm a crazy person, but ultimately I love having like one touch point to go back to like constantly see like everything I need to do in one place. So I know when that list is done, like I'm done for the day. So that's kind of the place I always come back to is Asana and making sure that that's what I need it to be.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so tell everyone where they can find you, follow you, connect with you, all the things.
Yeah. So the best place and really the most current information is on my website at workwellwithkate.com. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok at workwellwithkate. And my TikTok's probably a little bit goofier than my Instagram. My Instagram is definitely more like informative and like information, and TikTok can be a little bit goofier sometimes, but always feel free to hit me up on social media or via email at kate@workwellwithkate.com.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Everyone needs to go follow you. And I love the reels you've done too, which I guess those are taken from TikTok. I'm still not on TikTok. So
don't worry about it. It's like honestly not a priority.
I love it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode all the way until the end. I appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this episode, then I want to invite you to check out my website template shop too. Over on elizabethmccravey.com, you'll find show it website templates that are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. Maybe it's a challenge to update, and maybe even it's that thing that you really feel like is just completely holding your business back. Your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers, and that's exactly what my M-Shop templates do. So these are pre-made show it website templates where you can plug and play your content into it with ease and then get started with a website that's designed to actually help you make more money. These templates are designed to be SEO friendly on the back end, and they're not just pretty, but they are very strategic and with all the strategies I teach on this podcast. And best of all, they're easy for you to set up all by yourself. So shop them at elizabethmccravey.com/shop and come join the M-Shop family of hundreds of happy customers. And as an added perk, you can use the code BBPodcast at checkout to get 10% off any template as a thank you for being a part of the podcast family. So that's BB Podcast for 10% off any template over at elizabethmccravey.com. And if you love this podcast, don't forget that you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts so that you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and review for the show wherever you're listening. Share it with a friend, share it on Instagram or Facebook. That's a great way to support the podcast and get the word out. All right, I'll be back next week with another new episode.